Hello, and welcome to today's edition of the Patriot Radio Show with Oikike Igando Kure. Today we're going to look at the effects of COVID-19 on families, on women and children, especially with the outbreak of the pandemic in February this year in Nigeria. So many things happened. A lot of changes had to take place. The virus too has killed many people, tens and thousands of people globally, and Nigeria too has recorded hundreds of deaths. Changes have come in place, due to the economic and social issues that came up with COVID-19. And so today we're going to be looking at the effect of this pandemic on families, especially women and children. With me to discuss this issue is someone who has been at the forefront of the fight for women and children's rights. She is also a veteran television broadcaster. She is also someone who has been at the front of issues, especially when you talk about women and children issues in Africa and Nigeria. My guest also was a president of the Nigerian Association of Women Journalists in a watch. She is Evelyn Onyilo. Welcome to this discussion. You have been at the forefront of the fight of COVID-19 because I've seen you in the media doing so many works, since the outbreak of the virus. And so I just want you to tell us in summary, how have you seen the effect of this pandemic on family, especially women and children, during the course of your works on COVID-19?
All right. Thank you very much for having me on your program. And I was in the front lines of the fight against COVID-19. I'm still there because we formed a coalition of civil society organizations under the aegis of CSO's Emergency Intervention Group for COVID-19. I was also part of the FCT ministerial team against the media team against COVID-19. And so it brought me to the forefront of issues. It brought me face to face to the deadly effect of the pandemic on our people, and that many people in the FCT are infected, are still being infected. The numbers keep rising. And also, it was an opportunity for us to sensitize the people in our radio and TV appearances, as well as grassroots appearances, physical appearances, where we went to send the message of COVID-19 that it is real and it's been killing our people and that we must stop the spread. And by and large, the awareness created was good, and we have now what is like a seeming backlash or the harmful effects of COVID-19 on the family. They are affected because their economic capability is down. Women that used to cater for their families because of the small micro businesses they do, because of the lockdown, no more source of income, and hunger became very, very serious among especially the poor, and even the middle income earners became poor. Nothing to do, you cannot go out, and the little you have finished. And it was another sort of pandemic. Hunger pandemic now arose out of COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown.
When you talk about online schooling, you talk about data, you talk about electricity, you talk about smartphones and gadgets, and which I'm sure a lot of Nigerian families cannot afford. And so now we have issues where we have, especially children in the houses not doing anything. Are we beginning to see some issues arising from that?
Educational issues are arising because this has hit the education sector, and it means our children have been drawn back. They have lost the academic calendar. They have lost what they were supposed to be taught. They've been home for too long, and the brain might get very idle and eventually lazy. And this online thing, schooling, education thing, is just for those that are privileged. It's for the privileged, not the downtrodden and those in public schools. And even the private schools, because of the high cost, they are levying parents. I know of one school that sent a circular to parents to pay 100,000 per month. That is just outrageous. And how many parents, even those that we call well-to-do, can afford to pay 100,000 per child? Don't forget that some have 2-3 children in the same school. So that is a big issue and a big problem for our education sector, for the standard of education, because I know with this COVID-19 lockdown and the long absence from school, it has affected the quality of our education. It has affected our children, and because children have been locked down at home, it also has made them very vulnerable to wicked relations, very wicked societal vices. So the effect of this lockdown and COVID-19 on our children is quite negative.
During your work in the pandemic, have you actually seen a rise in cases of violence against women? And what do you think is wrong, and what do you think should be done right?
In fact, since the lockdown in the last 3-4 months, there has been an astronomical rise in the rate of gender-based violence, and especially sexual gender-based violence. It has risen to a pandemic. Now we're dealing with one pandemic called coronavirus, and we now have in our hands another pandemic called rape. It is so sad that in the last few months, the cases of rape of young girls, old women, children has been on the increase. And it is as a result of this coronavirus lockdown. Men are at home. They have become, some of them have allowed their minds to become the devil's workshop. And so they rape girls, they kill them. Look at the incident in Ibadan. Look at the incident in Benin. Across the nation, it is just crazy. And we must rise up to condemn it. Not only to condemn it, to make sure that we stop it, and also make sure that perpetrators of such gender-based violence are brought to book, and that our criminal justice system will address these issues and bring about and give them punitive punishment. Not just punishment that in a day or two they are out of the prison or jail. They must come up with punishment that will make sure that anybody thinking of raping a child or killing any child or woman or male child or even another man will have it with the law.
Say that Nigerian government particularly has been doing enough to tackle cases of gender-based violence.
You see, in 2015, we were all happy when the government of that time, the outgoing government, at the nick of leaving office, signed the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act 2015. And we were saying, yes, this is an act, if properly put to use, it will stop or reduce the incidences of violence against women and any form of violence for that matter. But from 2015 till now, it's 5 years. We've not seen how effective that bill is, that act is. It's a law now, and state governments, most of them have refused even to domesticate and sign that law. in their states. And so that is why we are where we are today, because there's a need for making that law work. You have a law and it is there and no one is using it. Going up and up, gender-based violence more than ever before. We must make that law work. We must make sure that the courts, the judgments that perpetrators get are so punitive enough that nobody will think of raping anybody or killing anybody out of sexual-based, gender-based violence. So we must make those laws work. Of recent, in this week, the Federal Executive Council meeting this Wednesday, 2 days ago, rose up and said they are going to tackle the issue of gender-based violence. On this note, I want to join the Honorable Minister of Women Affairs, Dame Pauline Tallen, to say thank you to the Federal Executive Council for taking that bold step in condemning and pledging their commitment to fight every form of gender-based violence. But beyond that, like I explained earlier, are we ready to have the political will to execute all these nice, beautiful commitments?
That has been the implementation.
So it is an appeal now. We, as members of non-governmental organizations, under the auspices of my NGO, the Initiative for Women's Accelerated Development in Africa. Yesterday we had a National General Assembly and webinar on Zoom nationally, and all our states and other major gender-based non-governmental organizations were on that Zoom. Our communique is coming out, and we will state our commitment and continuously condemn the issue of gender-based violence in Nigeria. And so we are appealing to the federal government and the Governors Forum that I hope it is not just playing to the gallery to make women feel happy and safe, and then they now leave everything and go to sleep, and our girls are being killed and murdered and raped continuously over time. We will, as an NGO, we will continue to fight for this, and we'll continue to make sure that we impress on them to fulfill all these promises, because we cannot afford to kill the mothers of the nation.